Captain Ethan Carter had been to many places across the stars. He had stood on the cold, rocky surface of Mars, negotiated peace on the war-torn planet of Vithora, and even helped a species from the moon of Keros negotiate a treaty for resources. But none of those experiences had prepared him for the mission he was about to embark on. His assignment had brought him to Lyranis, a distant and mysterious planet that was known for being home to one of the most powerful and advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Lyranis was a planet of contradictions. It had vast, towering cities filled with technology far beyond humanity's capabilities. Yet it was also a land of ancient traditions and fierce pride. The Lyranians were known for their strength and unwavering honor. They didn't seek alliances with other species easily, and many had tried, unsuccessfully, to make peace with them. Now, Earth needed them. The galaxy was at the brink of war, and the alliance of Lyranis was a key to preventing a galaxy-wide disaster. That's where Ethan came in. As the captain of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, Ethan was no stranger to delicate negotiations. But this mission was unlike any other. This wasn't about trading resources or securing a small alliance. This was about winning over a people who saw themselves as superior to everyone else, including humans. And at the heart of this civilization was Princess Sanara, the ruler who held the fate of Lyranis, and perhaps the galaxy, in her hands. The first time Ethan saw her, he understood why the Lyranians held her in such high regard. Princess Sanara was tall and graceful, her presence commanding the room without a single word. Her dark eyes, like two pools of deep, mysterious water, studied him with an intensity that could make even the bravest of men falter. Her long, midnight black hair cascaded down her back like a silken waterfall, and the ornate armor she wore seemed to shine with an almost otherworldly light. When she spoke, her voice was calm, yet it carried the weight of authority. "You are the human ambassador, Captain Ethan Carter," she said, her words measured but sharp. "I trust you understand the importance of this meeting. Your people have come to ask for our alliance, but know this: Lyranis does not bow to anyone." Ethan stood tall, meeting her gaze. He had faced many difficult negotiations before, and he had no intention of showing weakness now. "I'm aware," he replied, his tone unwavering. "But I've also heard that the Lyranians respect strength." "I believe we can offer that strength together." Zanara studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small, almost imperceptible smile, she spoke again. "Perhaps. But be warned, Captain. You won't last even one night with me." There was no malice in her voice, just a cold, calculating confidence. It wasn't about physical strength or power. Zanara was speaking of something deeper, something that Ethan couldn't quite understand yet. Ethan's eyebrows furrowed. "I beg your pardon?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Zanara's smile remained, but it was tinged with amusement. "You will see soon enough. The trials of Lyranis are not for the faint of heart." "And I am not a ruler who bows to weakness. If you want our alliance, you will have to prove that you are worthy." Ethan, never one to back down from a challenge, simply looked at her and said, "Show me." The words left his mouth without hesitation. To him, it was just another diplomatic challenge. He had faced worse in his career, and he wasn't about to let a few words from an alien princess intimidate him. But as soon as the words left his lips, he felt a shift in the air. Zanara's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and for a brief moment, Ethan could sense the intensity of her focus. It was like he had just stepped into a new world, a world where the rules were different and the stakes were higher than anything he had ever known. The princess nodded slowly, her smile fading into a neutral expression. "Very well, Captain. You will face the trials of Lyranis, and when you fail—" "I won't fail," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. "I never do." Zanara's eyes glinted with something resembling respect. "We shall see." The next day, Ethan found himself standing in the heart of the royal palace, a place unlike any he had ever seen. The architecture was awe-inspiring, with grand sweeping halls that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, each telling the story of the Lyrenian people, a history of conquest, survival, and strength. There were no windows, no soft furnishings. Everything was stark, purposeful, and, in its own way, beautiful. Zanara had arranged for Ethan to undergo a series of trials designed to test not just his physical strength, but his mental and emotional fortitude. As the captain of a diplomatic corps, Ethan had expected to be tested on his negotiation skills and his ability to relate to other cultures. Instead, he found himself preparing to face the most difficult challenges of his life. The first trial was to take place in the royal arena. It was not a fight to the death, but it was designed to test Ethan's ability to survive in an environment unlike anything he had experienced. The arena was vast, a sprawling expanse of sand and stone, surrounded by towering walls. In the center of the arena stood a massive creature, its body covered in thick, spiked armor. It was a predator, one of the fiercest beasts native to Lyrenus. Ethan knew that his survival would depend not only on his combat training, but also on his ability to think quickly. He had faced similar creatures in the past during his military service, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer size and power of the beast that stood before him. It was a test of courage, of resilience, and above all, of strategy. As the gates of the arena opened, the creature roared, its massive jaws snapping shut with a deafening sound. Ethan felt a wave of adrenaline rush through his body, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to move quickly. The beast lunged at him with terrifying speed, its claws slashing through the air. Ethan ducked, narrowly avoiding the attack, and rolled to the side. He grabbed a nearby spear, his fingers tight around the shaft, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about fighting the creature, it was about outsmarting it. For the next few minutes, Ethan fought with everything he had. The creature was relentless, but Ethan's quick thinking allowed him to avoid several near-death strikes. He had no intention of killing the beast. It wasn't about that. It was about showing Zanara that he had the stamina, the intelligence, and the courage to face impossible odds and survive. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ethan managed to subdue the creature, using a combination of agility and strategy to trap it in a corner of the arena. He was exhausted, covered in sweat, but alive. Zanara stood at the edge of the arena, watching silently. As the gates opened, she walked forward, her expression unreadable. Ethan stood tall despite his exhaustion and faced her. "You survived," she said simply, her voice carrying no hint of approval or disapproval. But this was only the first trial. Ethan didn't respond. He was too tired to speak, but the fire in his eyes told her everything she needed to know. He was not backing down. The princess's eyes glinted with something, perhaps respect, perhaps curiosity. She stepped forward and spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You may have survived this trial, Captain, but there are many more to come. I hope you are ready." Ethan nodded, his expression determined. "I am ready." And so, the trials of Lyrenus had begun. The sun had barely risen over the jagged peaks of Lyrenus when Captain Ethan Carter was once again summoned to face the princess. His body was sore from the battle in the royal arena, yet his mind was sharp. This was far from over, and he had made a promise to himself that he would not falter. The princess had warned him, but now he was determined to prove her wrong. Ethan entered the grand hall of the palace, where Zanara awaited him. She was standing at the center of the room, her eyes never leaving him. Unlike the cold, emotionless gaze she had given him during their first meeting, today there was something different. Perhaps it was a spark of respect, or a new interest in the human who had survived the first trial. Whatever it was, Ethan was ready to face it. "You're awake," Zanara said, her voice steady. "I trust the arena wasn't too much for you." Ethan stood tall despite his exhaustion. He nodded. "It was nothing I couldn't handle. I'm ready for whatever you throw at me next." Zanara's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, but her eyes remained intense.
You think you're ready. But the trials of Lorenus are not so simple, Captain.
Strength is not the only thing we value here. Your mind, your ability to endure, and your willpower will be tested just as much as your body. Ethan's brow furrowed. He wasn't sure what she meant, but he didn't question her. If he was to prove himself worthy of an alliance with the Lyrinians, he had to survive whatever came next. Without another word, Zanara motioned for him to follow her. They walked through the palace halls, and Ethan couldn't help but notice the strange, almost eerie quietness that filled the space. The palace was a fortress of power, and every corner seemed to be watching him, testing him. The grand towering windows revealed the vast, untamed wilderness of Lorenus, stretching for miles with thick forests and towering mountains that seemed to touch the sky. It was a world that seemed both beautiful and dangerous, and he was in the heart of it. They arrived at a large chamber deep within the palace, a place Ethan had not yet seen. The walls were adorned with intricate, alien designs that seemed to pulse with life. In the center of the room was a large, clear pool of water. The pool itself was surrounded by strange markings, symbols that Ethan didn't recognize. Zanara stepped to the edge of the water, her eyes locked on him. "This is the next trial," she said, her voice steady. "You will face what lies within this pool. It is not a creature to fight, nor is it a puzzle to solve. But it is something far more challenging." Ethan stared at the water, trying to understand what she meant. The surface of the pool was calm, almost serene, and there was nothing unusual about it. But he knew better than to trust appearances. He had learned that the hard way in the royal arena. "You want me to face whatever comes from that pool?" Ethan asked, his voice calm despite the nervous flutter in his chest. Zanara nodded, her expression unreadable. "You must face it. You must not only survive, but you must endure." Ethan stepped closer to the pool, his boots making soft sounds against the stone floor. The air around him seemed to grow heavier, the silence thick with anticipation. For a moment, he thought about backing out, but he had made a promise to himself. He wasn't going to fail. "Not now." He knelt down at the edge of the pool, staring into the clear water. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the water began to ripple, as if something beneath the surface was moving. Ethan's heart quickened, his muscles tense. He stood and took a step back, but the pool was silent again. Zanara's voice broke the stillness. "It will come for you when you least expect it. You must remain calm. Do not let fear take hold." Ethan nodded. He could feel the tension building in his chest, but he forced himself to focus. His mind was clear, his thoughts sharp. He wasn't going to let whatever came out of that pool get the better of him. Minutes passed. His patience was beginning to wear thin when the water suddenly surged. A dark shape rose from beneath the surface, moving swiftly toward him. It was like a massive eel, its sleek body slithering through the water with terrifying speed. Its eyes were a glowing, piercing blue, and its long, sharp teeth glistened in the dim light of the chamber. Without thinking, Ethan leaped backward, drawing a knife from his belt. The creature lunged at him, its jaws snapping shut with a deafening noise. Ethan narrowly avoided the attack, his heart racing. He was already exhausted from the battle in the arena, and now this new challenge was pushing him to his limits. But he couldn't let the creature win. He couldn't fail Zanara, or himself. Ethan slashed at the creature with his knife, but it was too quick, the eel-like being twisted and turned, its body moving like liquid. And Ethan found himself backing into a corner of the chamber. The creature closed in, its eyes never leaving his. It was clear that it wasn't just attacking, it was testing him. He could feel the weight of his exhaustion pressing down on him, but he fought through it. He knew that if he failed now, he would lose everything. He would lose the respect of the princess, and worse, he would fail in his mission to secure the alliance. But as he stood there, waiting for the next move, he realized something. This wasn't just about fighting the creature. It was about enduring. It was about holding on, even when everything inside him screamed to give up. With a sudden burst of energy, Ethan dived at the creature, catching it off guard. He grabbed it by its long, slick body and pulled it out of the water, slamming it against the stone floor. The creature let out a hiss of fury, but Ethan wasn't finished. He wrapped his arms around it and held it down, the weight of it pressing against him, his muscles screaming in protest. Time seemed to stretch out, but he didn't let go. He couldn't let go. Finally, the creature stopped thrashing. Ethan released it slowly, his chest heaving with every breath. The creature, now motionless, lay on the floor before him. He had survived. Zanara stepped forward, her face impassive as she watched him. Ethan could feel her gaze on him, and though her expression didn't change, there was something in her eyes, a recognition of what he had just done. She nodded once, a subtle gesture before speaking. "You passed the test," she said, "but it is not over yet." Ethan collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with exhaustion. Sweat dripped from his forehead, and his heart pounded in his chest. But he couldn't let himself rest, not yet. There was still more to come. He had to finish what he started. Zanara's voice broke the silence. "The next trial will be your greatest test yet. But for now, rest. Recover. You will need all your strength." Ethan looked up at her, determination still burning in his eyes. "I'll be ready." Zanara turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the chamber with the creature's still body. Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The trials of Lorenus would push him beyond his limits, but he was ready. He had to be. For the future of humanity and the galaxy, he couldn't afford to fail. Ethan's body ached from the trials he had already faced, yet he knew this was just the beginning. Each challenge set before him by Princess Zanara had pushed him further, testing both his body and mind in ways he hadn't imagined. But in all the trials so far, there was one thing that he couldn't shake: the princess herself. Her gaze, her quiet confidence, and the way she seemed to anticipate his every move unsettled him in ways he couldn't understand. She was not just a ruler, she was something more, something that demanded respect, even admiration. And yet, there was an undeniable barrier between them, one that neither of them had yet crossed. As the days passed, Ethan found himself more and more drawn into the culture of Lorenus. The people, though distant and proud, had an undeniable strength about them. It wasn't just physical prowess that made them powerful, it was the deep, unwavering sense of honor that ran through their veins. He had seen it in their warriors, in their leaders, and most especially in Zanara. Every decision she made was weighed with care, every word she spoke measured with intent. One evening after another grueling trial, Ethan was summoned once again to the princess's chamber. His body was sore, his muscles stiff from the constant strain, but he wasn't about to show weakness. He had made it this far, and he intended to finish what he had started. Zanara stood at the center of the room when he arrived, her back straight, her posture regal. She did not need to speak for her presence to fill the room. There was a quiet power in her, something Ethan couldn't quite put his finger on, but it made him feel small in comparison.
"You are doing well, Captain," she said, her voice calm but strong.
"You have passed the trials set before you, but the final test is not one of strength or endurance. It is a test of the mind." He had come to expect the unexpected with Zanara, and this challenge didn't surprise him. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. Zanara's eyes locked onto his, her gaze intense. "You think you are, but the trials of Lorenus are not just about physical strength. They are about understanding. They are about knowing what it truly means to lead, to sacrifice, and to make decisions that affect not only yourself, but an entire people. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He had never been one for deep philosophy, especially not in the midst of a high-stakes negotiation, but there was something about the way Zanara spoke that made him listen, made him reflect on the meaning behind her words. "You have seen how we fight, Captain," Zanara continued, her voice softening. "But you have not seen what we truly fight for. You have not yet understood the burden of leadership that weighs on my shoulders. You are not yet ready to understand what it means to carry the future of a people." Ethan felt a pang of guilt stir in him. He had been so focused on surviving the trials, on proving himself worthy of the alliance, that he had never stopped to think about the weight Zanara carried. She was not just a princess, she was a ruler, one whose decisions shaped the fate of an entire world. And though he had come here to ask for her people's allegiance, he realized now that he had never truly understood what that would cost her. Zanara turned her back to him, her gaze drifting out toward the massive windows that framed the royal chamber. The stars outside seemed to shimmer, distant and cold, but there was a quiet sadness in the princess's eyes that spoke volumes. "My father was the last ruler of Lyranus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was a great leader, a warrior unlike any other. But he was also a man burdened by his own choices. He made decisions that saved our people, yes, but they also cost him everything. He died alone, and when he died, I was left to take his place." Ethan stood in silence, his mind racing. He had heard stories of the Lyrenian monarchy, stories of legendary warriors, great battles, and an unbroken legacy of power, but he had never heard this part of the story, the part that spoke of loss, of the personal sacrifices that came with leadership. "Being a ruler is not about glory or power," Zanara continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "It is about making impossible decisions, about carrying the weight of an entire world on your shoulders, and knowing that no matter what you do, someone will always suffer. That is the price of leadership."
"And I carry that price every day."
Ethan felt a wave of understanding wash over him. He had come here seeking an alliance, but now he saw the true cost of that alliance, the cost that Zanara had paid over and over again. He had thought of her as a princess, a ruler, someone who held the power to grant or deny his request, but now he saw her as something more, someone who had sacrificed more than he could ever understand. "You've asked for our alliance," Zanara said, her voice now steady, the sadness gone. "But before I give you my answer, before I make a decision that will affect not only my people but the entire galaxy, I need to know that you understand. I need to know that you comprehend the weight of what you're asking." Ethan took a step forward, his eyes locked onto hers. He didn't speak, but his expression conveyed his sincerity. He had asked for an alliance, yes, but now he realized that it was more than just a political move. It was about trust, about understanding the price that each of them would pay for the future they sought to build together. Zanara studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing and unwavering, and then, for the first time since he had arrived on Lyranus, she smiled. It was not the cold, calculating smile from their first meeting, nor the faint smirk she had given him during the trials. This smile was different. It was warm, genuine, and for a brief moment Ethan saw the person behind the princess, the woman who had carried the burden of her people's future alone for so long. "You have passed the test, Captain," she said softly. "You understand now?" Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what Zanara would say next, but he knew that the path ahead of him had just become far more complex. The princess had not only tested his physical and mental strength, but she had also tested his ability to understand the true nature of leadership, the sacrifices, the choices, the burden of responsibility. For the first time since his arrival, Ethan truly understood what it meant to be in her shoes, to carry the weight of an entire people. He wasn't just asking for an alliance, He was asking Gennara to trust him, to believe that he was worthy of the sacrifices she had made. Zanara's expression softened, and she turned away from the window, walking back toward him. "I will grant you your alliance, Captain," she said, her voice firm yet kind.
"But you must understand one thing. This alliance is not just a political move.
It is a bond between two peoples, a bond that comes with a cost, and that cost will be borne by both of us. Are you willing to pay it?" Ethan met her gaze, his answer clear in his mind. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I am willing to pay that cost." Zanara nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "Then we will stand together. For the future of Lorenis, for the future of Earth, and for the future of the galaxy." As Ethan left the chamber, he felt a new sense of understanding between him and the princess. The trials had not been about physical strength or endurance. They had been about understanding, about trust, and about the willingness to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. The real test had not been in the arena or the trials of Lorenis. It had been in the choices they both made. The alliance was not just a political move. It was a bond forged in the fires of sacrifice, one that would shape the future of their worlds. The stars twinkled brightly over the palace of Lorenis, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in his chest. The trials were behind him now. He had survived them all, each one more difficult than the last, but it wasn't the physical challenges or the mental endurance that haunted him. It was the final trial, the one Zanara had spoken about so many times in whispers and quiet warnings. It had been weeks since his arrival on the planet, and with every passing day his connection to Princess Zanara grew stronger. He had seen her strength, her wisdom, and her resolve. She was a ruler unlike any other, but she was also a woman, a person, carrying a heavy burden. He had seen glimpses of her humanity in the quiet moments between the trials, when the walls between them seemed to drop just a little. But tonight was different. Tonight, the stakes were higher than ever. The night of reckoning. Zanara had told him little about it, only that it would be the final test, not just for him, but for both of them. If he succeeded, if he proved himself worthy, the alliance between Lorenis and Earth would be secured. But if he failed, everything would fall apart. There would be no future, no bond between their peoples. The weight of it pressed heavily on him as he walked through the halls of the palace, heading toward the chamber where Zanara awaited him. He had been preparing for this moment for days, mentally steeling himself for whatever came next. But as he walked through the corridors, he couldn't help but feel like he was walking toward an unknown fate. He reached the grand doors of the chamber, the ones that had remained closed throughout his time on Lorenis. They were massive, made of black stone that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. They were the gateway to something much more significant than any trial he had faced before. With a deep breath, Ethan pushed open the doors and entered. Inside, the chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of smooth, dark stone, and strange, glowing symbols adorned the surfaces, casting an eerie light across the room. In the center of the room stood Gennara, her back to him. She was dressed in a flowing gown made of a material that shimmered like stardust, her long black hair cascading down her back in a graceful wave. She turned slowly, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. For a moment he could only stare at her, her beauty and strength overwhelming. But there was something else in her eyes now. A quiet sadness, mixed with determination. She was not just a ruler standing before him. She was a person, a woman carrying the weight of her world on her shoulders. And tonight, they would face it together. "You've come," she said, her voice steady, but there was something soft about it. Something that wasn't there before. "This is the test of everything we've built, of everything you've endured. But it is also a test of trust, of what we are willing to give to one another." Ethan nodded, his throat dry. "I'm ready." Zanara looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something inside her. Then she nodded. "Very well. The final trial is not one of strength nor of survival. It is a test of what you are willing to sacrifice. The future of our peoples, the future of Lorenus and Earth, depends on your willingness to choose. Ethan didn't understand. What do you mean, sacrifice? Zanara stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. In order for us to move forward, for us to truly become allies, we must both give something up, something precious. It's the only way for the bond between us to be real, for it to be built on something deeper than politics or power. What do you want me to sacrifice? Zanara took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering.
The question is not what I want you to sacrifice, Captain.
It is what you are willing to give up for the greater good. What are you willing to sacrifice for the future of our peoples, for peace? The room seemed to close in around him as the weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just about an alliance between two worlds. It was about something much more. It was about trust, about forging a future where both sides could coexist, but that future would come at a cost. Zanara took a step back, her expression unreadable.
There is a ritual, an ancient one, that will bind our worlds together. It is not a ritual of blood or war, but one of sacrifice.
We must both give something up, something that we hold dear, something that defines us, in order to seal this bond. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't know what she meant. What could he give up that would matter enough to make this alliance real? He had given his time, his energy, his body in the trials. But this was different. This was deeper than that. Zanara continued, her voice soft but firm. If you are willing, Captain, you will need to make a choice that could change everything. Are you prepared to sacrifice something important to you for the sake of peace? Ethan stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had faced battles, both physical and mental, but this was different. This was not a battle he could fight with his strength or his skills. This was a battle of the heart, a decision that would shape the future. He looked at Zanara, his heart heavy. What do I have to do? Zanara's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them, a knowing that made Ethan's chest tighten. The ritual requires us to give up something that defines us, something we cannot live without. It could be a person, an ideal, or a belief. You must decide what it is that you are willing to sacrifice in order for this alliance to be real. Ethan felt his stomach churn. The idea of giving up something so important was terrifying. But the thought of failing, of letting down both his people and Zanara, was even worse. Zanara stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. This is the final test, Captain. It is not about strength, but about what you are willing to give. The future of both our peoples depends on it. Ethan's mind raced as he thought about what she was asking. What could he give up? What could he sacrifice for the greater good? He thought of Earth, of the people he had left behind, of the responsibility he carried. But he also thought of Lorenus, of Zanara, and of the future they could build together if he made the right choice. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the stars outside. Ethan's heart beat loudly in his chest as he looked at Zanara, his thoughts a whirlwind. And then, slowly, he understood. He understood what she was asking, and he knew what he had to do. I am willing to sacrifice my past, Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I will leave behind the person I was, the captain who came here for a mission, and embrace the future. I will stand with you, Zanara, and I will give everything I have for our peoples. Zanara's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Ethan saw something flicker in her gaze, something like relief, mixed with respect. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his cheek. You are more than I expected, Captain, she whispered. You have passed the final trial. And in that moment, as the weight of their choices settled between them, Ethan knew that whatever came next, whatever sacrifices they both made, would not be the end. It would be the beginning of something greater, something built on trust, sacrifice, and the shared desire for peace. The future was not certain, but together they would face it. And for the first time, Ethan felt a deep sense of hope, something that had eluded him since he had arrived on Lyrenis. Whatever came next, they would face it together.